And welcome to Down Peppertree Lane with Mike D. Today we're going to talk about David Cassidy. When I was growing up as a kid, probably the biggest star around. There were a lot less channels and networks, and most people, most kids watched The Partridge Family, and he was this huge star. He was kind of like our Elvis Presley for that time. And I have a theory that in the early 70s, the first half of the decade, the Vietnam War was still going on and people wanted comfort music. And like Cat Stevens and Bread and the Partridge Family, it made you feel happy. Come on, get happy. But the last part of the decade, after the Vietnam War, people wanted to go crazy, have fun, explore, party. That was disco, punk rock. Everything was different in the second half of the decade. So, kind of what I recall is 75 being a benchmark, and then the winds of change blew and the culture changed, and the Partridge Family went off the air and it was gone, and David Cassidy was gone because the culture changed. But having said that, what I want to tell you is David signed a deal with RCA Records, the home of Elvis, and he recorded 3 albums in the mid to late 70s, and he did it his way. He's a really talented guy and a really good emotional singer, if nothing else. Just listen to the way he sings and emotes and puts across a song. You have to give him that. And he became more successful in the UK and Europe and abroad. His record in 75 was called The Higher They Climb. And it sold 2 million units around the world. That's pretty good for a teen idol to leave a show and go on and sell a record of 2 million units around the world. I mean, that just shows you he wasn't a disposable teen idol that would just be thrown off to the side. He had some staying power. He ended up doing big Broadway shows and Vegas shows and being real successful in other areas the rest of his life because he had this talent. It just wasn't superstardom anymore, but he was talented and continued to work. So the album comes out, it's successful in UK and England, abroad, and he has a big hit record called I Write the Songs. And it was written by one of the Beach Boys who produced his record. And David realized it was a really interesting, unique song, and he grabbed it and he said, I'm going to be the first person to sing it. His version on YouTube, which is pretty popular, is really good. I think it's really emotional. I kind of get the song now that I heard David Cassidy sing it. I never really got it with Barry Manilow, but what happened next is it was a hit record in like 30 countries around the world. It was this big popular song in, Europe, Asia, China, Australia, whatever. So David Cassidy was back on the boards. But RCA, they didn't release it in America for some reason. They're like, well, it's a ballad. We want to do something like rock and roll. And they did not release it. So Barry Manilow grabbed it. Barry Manilow was a bit confused by the song, like I am music and I write the song. He thought it might be misinterpreted as a big ego trip. And it's written from the point of being music, and what music represents. So you have to sing it with the right interpretation. And it was a #1 record for Barry Manilow. But, he was a hot artist at the time, and people wanted to hear what he had to sing and record at that moment. And it was like the record of the year for him. And David Cassidy, that was his lost hit record. It never made it to America. Just every other country in the world. So that's kind of what happened with him. He got swept away in that cultural tide, and there is always a sea change in the culture, and it shifted again in 1980, and we've talked about this on this channel. But I would highly recommend this 1975 record, The Higher They Climb. David Cassidy tells this story of this rock singer who becomes famous in the 50s, and he does these really cool 50s rockers on the album, and then is still famous in the 60s, and he does these really amazing like Beach Boys type 60s songs, and then he does modern 70s music. So he covers the whole gamut, and everyone who's listened to this record says it's a masterpiece. It's this grand statement, and he really was laying down the fact that he was not just a teen idol, had all these incredible musical gifts. So I would definitely check out The Higher They Climb. And then the next record he did was called Home Is Where the Heart Is, and that is a great song called Tomorrow. I would definitely recommend you listen to Tomorrow. So if you want to hear the real talent of David Cassidy, get his RCA records in the mid-70s after the Partridge Family, because they were telling him where to stand, what to sing, how to record, and he had huge fights. They wanted him to talk in one song, and he didn't want to talk, and there were just huge knockdown, breakdown, fights in the studio because David Cassidy wanted to grow and mature as an artist. And it's just a really hard thing for a teen idol. He did find success in other ways, but he had lots of peaks and valleys after that. So that's the story of the lost to David Cassidy hit record. And the Partridge Family, if you watch the show on DVD or YouTube, it really captures a moment. I think they were cooler than the Brady Bunch. They were just considered a little bit cooler, and they had a rock band, and Keith Partridge, the character, was just a little more, I think, in sync with kind of like edgier teens at the time than the Brady Bunch, but they went together hand in hand like milk and cookies, and all the kids would watch the Bradys and Partridge back to back on Friday nights, and that was the thing to do. That was like the Friends of the 90s. In the 90s, you watched Friends. In the 70s, it was the Partridge Family. So a lot of kids had shag haircuts for the rest of the 70s. They really copied his look. I had a longer shag haircut, parted in the middle, wore puka shells and beads, those Hawaiian shells. That was all, part of that David Cassidy image. And I'll leave it at that. Check out my work down peppertreelane.com. I have some cool jewelry and antiques in my shop. And support me on Patreon. And enjoy this beautiful scene out in the park that I've found for you. Take care. Bye.